And you'll see this red dot and it'll start recording. And so you can kind of rest your arm right here if you want. Come and talk to you today about his experience. So he's gonna share some of it with you, and then we'll save some time at the end for questions or pictures if you guys have them. Any questions? All right.
Yes, please hold the questions until the last 15 or 20 minutes. And if you don't ask questions, I'll continue talking, filling it in with other things. So I want to start first by telling something that's really moving about, well, let's start passing these around. Yeah. These the shadow box and the book has been made by Tom's daughter Jessie, who's a World War II buff, and the book contains my dog tags, which has the dog tags on it. Gives my blood type and my religion and my serial number, 36473680. That's my serial number. And in that book is my ration book, because everybody in the United States were rationed. You couldn't go and fill your tank up at the gas station. You had to have stamps to do that. So there's a lot of trading of stamps. I'll give you 1 sugar for 2 gallons of gas, things like that. 100 different things were rationed. They had to support us overseas. There were 16 million of us overseas. And there's only, of those 16 million, there's less than 400,000 left. And we lose 400 of those every day. So, okay, and other things in that book are letters from 3 presidents from the White House. Truman is for being in the Army, and then Obama and George Bush is for my volunteerism since I left the Army. So the first thing is a real moving incident that I uncovered recently, and that's in the Netherlands. There is a cemetery with 8,300 GIs buried there. And actually, there were 17,000 killed in the D-Day and in Battle of the Bulge. But the parents of the ones that, of half of those opted to bring them back home, bury them at Arlington National Cemetery. This cemetery is kept up weekly by the people who live there, and this project is passed down from one generation to the next. And there's 100 people in line would like to get on that list. They're still waiting.
A list to do what?
To take care of the plot. So they don't have to do any lawn mowing or anything like that, but they bring flowers and they pray for the GIs who liberated them. And even high school classes have adopted a plot or two, and businesses have plotted. So now I will start about me. I was in Sacred Heart Seminary on 2701 West Chicago Boulevard in Detroit, studying to be a Catholic priest. I finished my high school. I had 2 years of college, and I decided that I didn't have a calling to be a priest, so I left. And I was born and raised in Monroe, and since my father was on the draft board in Monroe, I knew what was going to happen. So I volunteered for immediate overseas duty, but even the Army would not send a raw recruit overseas to be shot at. So I had to go to Camp Joseph T. Robinson in Little Rock, Arkansas. And I'll give you 5 points that would describe pretty well basic training. Number 1, you had to be able to walk with your weapon and backpack for 20 miles in a moment's notice. Number 2, you had to be able to climb a rope fence, a rope ladder over a fence. Number 3, you had to be able to take your weapon apart, clean it, and put it back together again with a blindfold on. The blindfold was because they do not have lamps in foxholes. Number 4 is you get into a foxhole and have a tank run over. It's best to keep your head down. And number 5 is you crawl with your weapon underneath barbed wire with a machine gun with live bullets shooting over your head. Best to not raise your head. So I graduated and went on a troop train to New York, got on a boat, and it was a luxury boat. It was the sister ship of the Queen Elizabeth, but it had been outfitted with bunks. There were 5 bunks, one on top of each other, pull-down bunks. And it was a luxury ship, but it wasn't a luxury ship. So we went overseas then, and we had nobody watching us. No, what do you call that, Tom?
Not sure.
Boat going alongside.
Oh, an escort.
We had no escort, so they would zigzag 8 days over the ocean. When they zigged, they rode one way. When they zagged, they rode the other way. And
How many GIs were on the ship?
6,000 GIs on the ship, and so we spent our time waking up in the morning and getting in line for breakfast, working ourselves up 5 decks and got breakfast in our mess kits and ran downstairs and got in line for lunch and ran downstairs and got in for dinner. Same thing. And of those 6,000, probably 5,500 had never been on the ocean before. So needless to say, it wasn't a very good crossing for them. The people who were not sick had to clean up after the people who were sick. And then we landed in the Firth of Forth in Glasgow, Scotland, got on a troop train, went down to the bottom of England, and got on an English ship. And you know, people swim the English Channel, and this was after D-Day. So I went in after D-Day, and It took us 2 days to cross the English Channel. And our rations for those 2 days, since it was an English ship, it was a loaf of bread and a pot of tea. That's what we had. And some of the guys, we had to sleep on the deck, on the steel deck, and we were locked in a hold, so we wouldn't make noise for the U-boats. And after 2 days, we landed at Le Havre, France, and they said, okay, you walk up this mountain here, and there's a cot and a hot dish waiting for you. So we walked up the mountain, had a hot meal, and 20 minutes later, they got us out of the cot, walked down the mountain, got on the 40 and 8. 40 and 8 is a boxcar. It was missing slats and everything. So we went to the front in that boxcar, and that 40 and 8 means 40 men or 8 horses.
Would fit inside.
What?
That's how many would fit inside, 40 men.
40 men or 8 horses, right. Right. So we soon, after a couple of days, we reached the front line, then we went into combat. By the way, combat, this on this side of my head is CIB, a combat infantry medal for those in combat. Instead of $50 a month, we got $60 a month. $10 worth of the privilege of being shot at. And over here is the Bronze Star, which we earned in that book. That tells why I got a Bronze Star. And if you had to relieve yourself while we're riding on the boxcar, you picked somebody that you knew was a friend of yours to hold your belt while you leaned over the side. So we went into combat, and that is where I was associated with General Patton, who nobody liked, but he was capable, all right. But General Patton rescued the prisoners at Buchenwald, which was the largest German concentration camp. And I speak with Michael Weiss, whom I met at Farmington Hills Holocaust Museum, which I hope everybody can see. Very livid. And they have a boxcar there, and they have pictures, and they have videos, and everything. And Michael, when we liberated Buchenwald, the largest concentration camp in Germany, Michael Weiss was 21. I didn't know him then, and I was 21. And Buchenwald had a Commodore who had a wife named Ilse Koch, K-O-C-H. And she rode her pony through the concentration camp. If you weren't working fast enough or hard enough, she would use her crop to urge you on with it. At one point, she announced over the loudspeaker in Buchenwald, anybody with a tattoo on their bodies, any place, please come to the medical center. And they did, and she picked the tattoos that she liked. And out of their skin, she made book covers, shoes, and one other thing, can't remember that. And so, then when the war ended, when the combat ended, I volunteered to go into Eisenhower's honor guard. And in Frankfurt, Germany, I was assigned to a part of the honor guard. It was spit and polish. You had to clean your clothes and shine your shoes every day. And that's where General Eisenhower's Supreme Headquarters of Allied Expeditionary Forces was. And so we guarded his place of business. We guarded his plane on the tarmac, which was not a good job to do because it's open, wide open there. So in Frankfurt, I was put in charge of an enlisted men's service club. So I had a 2.5-ton truck, which I used to get supplies from Wiesbaden, the next city. And I had a personnel carrier that I went out and got 8 girls, women who were working for me, and they waited on the tables. And also I had 2 girlfriends when I was there. The first one was Anita, and Anita lived with her mother and grandmother. And she came and invited me to dinner one time. So I went, and all 3 women had lost their husbands as a German army. And Anita had lost her child to typhoid. And she taught me German and I taught her English. And I left, excuse me. I left we had 3 different types of food. We had C rations, which we needed a fire to use, that's in a can. We had K rations, which included cheese, crackers, and cigarettes. We didn't know what cigarettes would do to you at that time. And the D rations, which were solid chocolate. We preferred the D rations, but it's a quick pickup. So I would give Anita's mother cigarettes, and she would ride her bicycle up into the dairy farm country and get dairy food for them and then invite me to dinner. At one time, we went through New Year's Eve there. New Year's Eve in Germany is like Halloween here. Anita and I went around ringing doorbells, and they would let us in and hand us a shot of schnapps, which is wicked liquor. And then we danced waltzes. So then we go on to the next one. So we had fun, and I learned a lot from Anita and her family. And by the way, my weapon was a BAR, Browning Automatic Rifle. And it's like the AR-15. It's talked about so much in the paper now. You pull your trigger and 20 shots go out. And the first thing we did they're 20 pounds, first thing we did, all other BAR men, is take the bipods off and toss them in the ditch. And then we took the flash hider off, tossed them in a ditch. And we took the butt plate off, tossed them in a ditch. I think they're still finding them after 70-some years in Germany. And then there's 20 pounds of ammunition you had to carry too. So that's 40 pounds that you can't let out of your sight. And I had an R&R in Switzerland and Germany, Switzerland and Rome.
What's R&R stand for?
Recovery and resuscitation and recovery.
So it's like a break.
A break, yeah, it's a break, not furlough. And so I enjoyed that, a real good part of it, being overseas like that. Oh, then I had one other girlfriend named Brunhilde. I called her Bruni. And I had a dog named Queenie, who was trained by the German army to smell Frenchmen. So we had to untrain her. She's a German Shepherd, a big dog. We had to untrain Queenie to smell Germans, because in the Battle of the Bulge, there were English-speaking German soldiers who would capture some of our guys, change uniforms with them, and infiltrate our lines. One thing that we used to distinguish those guys are who won the last World Series in the United States. If they couldn't answer, then we took them into custody. So eventually they thought I was having too much fun over there with Anita and Brunhilde. So they sent me home. They signed me up to get rid of me, I think. So I came back to the United States, and I received a call from my buddy Jim from Dearborn. who I was with quite a bit, and he was studying to be a surgeon at U of M. But he got shot through the right through the right elbow, and so he couldn't use his arm. But he called me up and said, Bill, why don't you come up to Ann Arbor and go to school here? So I did. First thing, when I came up, Jim and I hitchhiked to Illinois and to Pennsylvania and visited the parents of our friends who didn't come back. And we still had our uniforms on, so we had no trouble being picked up. We had never had to wait long. People let us drive, they bought us meals, and we had a very good time. And so while I was in Sacred Heart Seminary, I had 6 years of Latin, 4 years of Greek, 2 years of French, and I had learned German from Anita, and so I majored in Spanish. So I got my BA and MBA under the GI Bill, which is really good. It's the best thing they ever did at that time. They should be doing it now at the same time. And so one class I was assigned I remember his name, Julio del Toro, in the Romance Language Building on the campus in U of M. And my name was Yeager with a Y. And I met a girl, Lenore Wood. And so Wood, since there's only 9 in the class, Wood sat alongside of Yeager. And we were both so shy, we never said anything to each other. Took a blind date to get us together. And we've been together all the time up to now. And she was killed in an auto accident. And, so now there are 34 members of my immediate family who are glad that I didn't become a priest, that they're,
Or get shot.
oh, maybe we should
Time
stop
for
it.
questions.
Any questions? No. I didn't say anything about the way Japanese tried to interrupt our routine in the West Coast and the Germans in the East Coast. So if anybody wants to know any more now, I can answer any question you might have.
Done a good job.
Oh, I have a question.
Oh, sure.
So
Yes.
you were on like the move like ever, like so have you ever like stopped to rest, like when you were traveling to like the different countries and stuff?
What was that?
Did you ever stop to rest? So you were just on the move the whole time? As soon as you hit France, you were basically on the move?
Yes. Some people ask, what was it like being in combat? I tell them, I was cold, I was hungry, and I was scared the entire time that I was in combat. So,
You basically just moved, you never camped, you were either walking, mostly walking from, basically you walked from France, the shore of France, all the way to Germany, carrying his gun and sleeping on the ground. And
sometimes it was weeks before we could get a shower. But we went the same thing all over when we liberate a village in France. They always were pleasant to us because we liberated them. We saved their lives from the Nazis. And
so they sometimes made you a meal or let you sleep in a bed or something.
yes,
So occasionally you got,
right, they would give us a house. I remember one time, they gave us a room in a house. There were 12 of us, and we drew straws, and Ed Wood and myself won, and they gave us each a half an inch of schnapps in our mess kit. And everybody downed that schnapps, and 10 of them just dropped over. And because we've been so long without food and things, and Ed Wood, I won with Ed Wood. He said he had to hold me in bed because the bed was reeling up and down, sideways.
so you had more than a half an inch.
Well, it was maybe an inch, 3/4. So we used that schnapps in our cigarette lighters from then on. It had an invisible flame. You just click, put your cigarette there, and it's lit. So it's made out of potatoes. I never, if nobody has anything else, I'll just give a couple of quick things about Japanese. Japanese went into Santa Barbara Harbor in California, shelled oil refineries that we have there. And luckily they were not very good shots, but they're in a sub. So the sub was raising and lowering. And then another one was in Billings, Oregon, where they fastened a helicopter to a sub and dropped a couple of bombs on Billings, Oregon. And when the war ended, the people in Billings invited the flyer of that helicopter to come over, and he became the Grand Marshal of the Lilac Festival in Billings. And when he died, his sister brought his ashes and they buried it in one of the craters that his bombs had left. And the third thing on the West Coast was balloon bombs. The Japanese fastened bombs onto balloons, and since the predominant winds are from west to east, they would let those go. And these balloon bombs landed all over the place. There was a minister who took his religion class out with his family for a picnic. He went to park the car, and one of his kids ran up and said, "Hey, Dad, we found something." And he said, "Don't touch it." Just then, it blew up. And he lost his whole family and his religion class. And some of those balloon bombs had floated all the way over to Omaha, Nebraska. And there could be some that are still out in the woods there. On the East Coast, there was a ship sunk by a German sub 50 miles off the mouth of the Mississippi River. And we had blackout shades for houses that were on the coast. If anybody has ever seen, the Russians are coming, the Russians are coming. So they had to pull down the blackout shades at night. And they had wardens with dogs who went up and down. And we had to teach women how to drive army trucks in case we were invaded. Anybody think of anything else we can talk about?
Oh, there's some questions about it.
Okay,
We were told that you were 16. Did anybody ever figure out that you weren't always
what was that?
Did actually, that he was actually 18,
Ah,
so not 16, but.
sorry, Julie told me you weren't quite 18 yet, and that you lied about your age. She might have been telling me about someone else, and I thought it was you.
Yeah, is that, because you were, he actually already had 2 years of college when he,
Oh,
so.
My bad, sorry.
The unusual thing about him is he had a deferment, he didn't have to go. But as soon as he decided he didn't want to be a priest, like he was like 2 years away from being ordained.
Right.
So he had to make a decision. He decided he didn't want to be a priest, but then there was no other choice. He couldn't have just gone and got a job somewhere. He would have been drafted. So, there were people that enlisted that lied about their age, right?
Oh, yes.
And you knew some guys in your unit.
Oh, yes. Some of them were 16, as low as 16. I don't think there are any 15-year-olds.
And the young woman asked if people found out, if the Army found out, what would happen?
Nothing. It's too late that they're already in combat. Oh, that's one thing. I received the
Ron Star.
no, where they assigned a Jeep and a driver to me, and they took me back, probably because I had 2 years of college, took me back to be questioned by generals, and at that point I would have done anything to be pulled out of combat.
They were going to give you officers.
They're going to send me back overseas, go to West Point.
Right, to
But
train as an officer.
Right, but then our outfit moved, and I think they're still looking for me.
So there's another question too.
Oh, no, kids first. Kids first.
Thought there was a hand over here.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to ask, like, what made you want to, like, I guess, fight? What made you, like, want to go into combat?
Yeah, so what, so you had said that you knew you were gonna get drafted, but, did you have any feelings about, joining the Army, like patriotic feelings, that kind of thing?
Oh, yes, patriotic, right.
I mean, basically, so I guess what he's asking is, why did you join up? Why did you do it?
Well, I felt guilty then because while I was in the seminary working, one summer I made 20mm shells in my hometown of Monroe. Monroe shock absorber converted to military. So I made 20mm shells. Another summer on vacation, I made camshafts for tanks. So I knew what was going on. So I volunteered. Yes?
What were you doing during the Cold War, and how much of a threat was it to people at the time?
So Cold War, so, you know, this, actually you may know more about it than we do. He was being a dad raising a family, basically.
Yes.
So your service ended, you did 2 years total, right?
Yes.
So when you got your honorable discharge in 1946, then he was basically done with the Army. So he was just a regular guy.
Right. Going to school all day.
Yeah. Yeah, he lived, they lived in the barracks up at Willow Run.
Yes.
There were so many freshmen GIs going to U of M, they had no room in the dorms. So they lived out here at Willow Run in the barracks that the people lived in that worked in the factory. And they bring a bus out, pick up all the students, take them into Ann Arbor and then back out to Willow Run.
Oh, wow.
We had to take an 6:30 bus to make an 8 o'clock class in Ann Arbor.
Oh,
And when I would go into my cubby hole, which is all it was, I would put my gloves on and my hat in order to keep warm because the furnace was in the middle and they stretched out far. Heat never got to me.
How many guys were in the barracks?
Oh,
How many students?
lots and lots.
50, 100?
Yeah, probably 100.
Yeah.
I had to move the chair away from my desk in order to get in bed.
I have 2 questions. The first is, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about when you walked through Buchenwald, and I was also wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the assignment that you had from President Eisenhower. You mentioned something maybe about the specialist.
What was that now?
So talk about your impressions when the Army had you walk through Buchenwald. So after the prisoners were all liberated, sent to the hospital and cared for, then they had all the soldiers walk through Buchenwald. Why did they do that?
Yes. Well, they did that and they took everybody from the nearby cities and made them walk through too. And well, I think when I came back here, they were still taking high schools through, as part of their training, through the Buchenwald. And Michael Weiss,
Wait, why did your commanders want you to go through Buchenwald?
so we would have a good answer as to why we were there. I do get a question at some of my other talks as to how do I feel about dropping the atom bomb. I tell them all you had to do was go through one concentration camp, and you know what the answer would be. And also, it took the Japanese 5 days to surrender. How many GIs would we have lost if it was 5 weeks?
So what were your impressions when you went through Buchenwald? What do you remember seeing?
Well, I can tell them more about Auschwitz. Auschwitz is, my wife and I went to Auschwitz,
Oh,
and that's where Michael Weiss lost his whole family. There's a sign over the door, work means freedom. And so the first building you come is a building that's completely filled with suitcases, because they told these people they're going on vacation. Second building was completely filled with shoes. The third building was completely filled with human hair. So, and you could smell death in the air, because they would bury the people, and so they didn't want to leave any evidence around as to what went on. But of course, everybody knew what was going on.
well, you mentioned the townspeople around these camps
Yes,
were forced to go look at the camps after they were liberated.
they were, that's right. They were.
Because why?
So they could realize what was going on under
Right.
their nose.
Because they didn't know.
They didn't
They were
know.
told they were work camps and they were actually death camps.
Right, they were death camps.
Then
We had one company of my company, the Trailblazer 70th Division, which was captured in the Battle of the Bulge. And they made them walk for miles and miles. Half of them died on the way, so we never saw them again.
So the other part of Ms. Wood's question was talk more about your time in Eisenhower's Honor Guard. So what is an Honor Guard?
It's spit and polish. You guard,
Spit and polish means,
that means you spit on your shoes and polish it every day.
so you had to look sharp
You had to
because
be
you were,
sharp. We're, yeah,
so you were getting, so Eisenhower was the supreme commander.
Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Forces.
Right. And so during the occupation of Germany, after Germany surrendered, he had an office set up in Frankfurt, and there was, how many guys were in the Honor Guard?
I don't know. I never saw it.
A couple hundred?
Yeah, a couple hundred.
And so basically you were supposed to look sharp because he's a big deal. And there were probably lots of public events that he attended, and
Yes.
you had to march around looking like you were.
Right.
So that's basically what he did.
Really fancy.
Yeah. But it was a big deal for him to be picked to do that, so. Because
Yes, it was.
It was good duty. Some soldiers would have wanted to volunteer for that and get picked for it.
Right.
We have time for a couple more questions.
So, did you ever meet any Soviet soldiers when you went to Germany?
Did you ever meet any Russian soldiers?
Oh, yes. Unfortunately. Our guys really had a habit of selling a Jeep to Russian soldiers. And they weren't very smart. So they just take the Jeep, run around the corner, and be picked up. So they lost their money, and we got our Jeep back.
So Russian soldiers were also stationed in Germany during the occupation.
Yes,
So, and you had some contact with them.
right. It was Patton's. Patton was the one who nobody liked really, but he was efficient. He wanted to be the first one to cross the Rhine into Germany. So he would take his tanks, go 20 miles, and we would walk behind 20 miles and clean up behind him.
Clean up meaning,
Clean out the snipers and things.
yeah.
At one point, he said, "Okay, guys, I need my trucks for oil for my tanks." And he says, "You won't get any mail for a while, and you won't get any food for a while. So you're on your own." So I took my BAR out into the woods, and it's a wonder we didn't kill half of the U.S. Army. We all shot at deer, and that's what we had to eat, venison. There's one back there.
I was reading something that, about the award that Orange got. He kept saying, you were awarded for fighting against the enemy. What exactly, or who exactly was the enemy in that scenario?
So when you get your Bronze Star, what was, who were you fighting there?
We were fighting the Germans and the occupying of France.
So that was in France.
That was in France, right. So it was the Battle of the Bulge.
So the Germans had, so you earned the Bronze Star for bravery under fire in the Battle of the Bulge,
That's right.
fighting the Germans.
Right.
Your unit cleaned out the Germans that were surrounding the American forces that were trapped in the Battle of the Bulge.
Right.
Yeah, so he actually, if you've read anything about the Battle of the Bulge,
Oh, you guys can wait for a second.
it was the American forces got completely surrounded by the Germans for like an extended period, like 6 months or something. And it was winter and it was horrible. A lot of GIs actually starved to death during that battle. And his unit chased the Germans off and sort of freed his and many other units in the Third Army. Chased the Germans off and rescued the ones that were still there. So that's what he got the Bronze Star for. It's like a award for bravery, I guess. That's what it
Yeah,
is.
that's what it is.
Thank you so much.